Hello again, college football fans. Well, the Auburn Tigers and their boosters are at it once again. They just cannot have a drama-free, clean break from a coach when they get ready to get rid of one, can they? I mean, we had Jetgate all those years ago when they tried to get Petrino out of Louisville. I think Tuberville was the coach at the time. Several times during the Gus Malzahn era, they have tried these little backroom coup attempts to get him out of there. Never really understood why, which leads me to my next point. Why did they ever fire Gus Malzahn in the first place? He was the perfect Auburn coach. I mean, took him to the national championship game his first year, beat Saban more than any other coach. I mean, that's the first line of your resume right there if you're an Auburn head coach. During this era, I mean, if it was still back in the 2000s and the 90s and the 80s, and Alabama was struggling, well, the early 90s, Alabama didn't struggle too much. But, in those other times, Auburn coaches, I guess, have to be judged according to, what's going on at Alabama. But at this time, when Saban is doing unprecedented things at Alabama, I mean, beating him 3 times in, 8 years Malzahn was there, that's pretty impressive, and that's just about as much as you can ask for if you're an Auburn fan and an Auburn, booster and alum, somebody that's in the broker room there on the plains. But second point, Harsin, I think, probably could develop into a very decent SEC coach, somebody that could lead. Obviously he showed great moxie in that Iron Bowl this year and the early part of the season. I mean, they started off 6-2. As late as November, they still were in the conversation for the college football playoff. Yes, the end of the season, there was a little bit of a collapse, but, in a first year for a head coach, I think that's more than forgivable. And honestly, I think this whole affair thing has got to be bogus because it's pretty clear that Auburn wants him gone. They feel like they made a mistake and they want to go ahead and correct that as quickly as possible. And I understand that from where they're coming from. Don't understand why they fired Gus Malzahn in the first place unless they had a blockbuster hire sewn up in their back pocket. That's what I told my Auburn buddy, the guy that I go to the Iron Bowl with every year. I told him when they fired Malzahn, I said, well, then obviously they've got something going with Hugh Freeze or, some big splashy Lane Kiffin or some big splashy hire like that. And then when they hired Harsin, I thought to myself, well, maybe, somebody knows something that I don't. He's a Boise State guy. That's where Chris Peterson came from. They've got a pretty stellar history in the last 20 or so years down there in Boise. So, that was my next thought. And I still think that somebody knew more than I did at that time because I saw flashes of what I feel like could have been a good coach under Harsin. But at this point, even if he manages to weather this storm, I don't see how he'll be able to flourish at Auburn, especially knowing that they've tried to pull this on him and all this with the affair and all that kind of stuff, trumping up all that kind of nonsense so that they can save a few bucks on the buyout. I don't see how Harsin will ever be able to put forth max effort for these people who have obviously tried to sabotage him. And maybe it will come out that he was fooling around with the assistant or whatever. But right now, it seems to me like he would have already been fired if they could have found enough evidence for the show cause. And so that all that being said, I guess the Harsin era has turned out to be a pretty big bust at Auburn. But the bottom line is this is all just a problem of not understanding or not appreciating your spot in the hierarchy. Okay, Auburn is never going to be Alabama. Nobody in the SEC is going to be Alabama, and that's something that I've harped on before. I feel like Alabama gets a little bit just kind of thrown into this whole SEC mix that, that's just an SEC thing. Okay, winning 6 national championships in 12 years is not an SEC thing. It's an Alabama thing. Alabama was winning national championships long before any other SEC schools were. Even back in the days when teams like Tulane and Georgia Tech were SEC schools, they weren't performing like Alabama. Alabama has owned several decades when it comes to SEC championships and that sort of thing. And, when they have down periods and there is a vacuum, a power vacuum, Florida's probably the closest program that's come to completely filling that power vacuum and dominating entire, swaths of time, entire decades or half decades. Other teams have their moments. Obviously, LSU has had some bright spots. Georgia has had some bright spots over the decades. They're riding on one right now. But Georgia is a great example of how it's not just an SEC thing. I mean, they had to bang their head against that door for how many years before they finally got to go through it? And a lot of things had to go their way. The ball had to bounce their way a lot in order for that to happen. And I just think that Auburn, and it may be a little bit more of this sort of Nick Saban effect on everyone, as everyone feels like, well, look at what they're doing at Alabama. If we can just hire the right guy, if we can find the next Saban, then we'll win 6 national championships in 12 years. And that's just ridiculous. I mean, even if Saban was at LSU for, 4 or 5 years, and he didn't start this breakneck pace that he was on. I mean, by year 2 at Alabama, he was there. He was already competing for national championships every year by year 2 at Alabama. He wasn't doing that at LSU. He got the one, and then they kind of fell off a little bit after that, and obviously he left for Miami, so we weren't able to see if he would have been able to sustain what he has done at Alabama at LSU, but it looks to me like he wouldn't have. He would have won some championships there, but he wouldn't have done what he's done at Alabama, because Alabama, this is our culture, this is our spirit, the people of this state, the people of this university accommodate for these sort of things, and we are the kings of the SEC, undisputed, and that's just the way it is, and everyone else is going to have to find their place in the hierarchy and be happy with it, because that's just the way things are in reality in the SEC. But I hope Auburn can get through this. I hope that they can weather this storm for them, because it's become a real storm for them, and maybe they will hit rock bottom and do what's necessary to break up this booster power broker thing that they have going on. I hear a lot of things about Jimmy Raines, the Yellowwood guy. Who knows what's going on down there? But I do hope that they are able to take care of this. Like I said earlier, I think the Bryan Harsin project has failed, and even if they have to buy him out at this point, they should probably just go ahead and get rid of him, because, like I said, even if he manages to weather this storm, I don't see how he'll ever be able to work for these people in a healthy environment for the rest of his time there. So good luck to Auburn down on the plains. Obviously I don't want them to fall off the map, because the Iron Bowl needs to be a healthy rivalry in order for me to be able to enjoy things the way that I like to. And so good luck to them in their search for a new coach, because it's late Tuesday afternoon right now. I would be very surprised if this time next week Bryan Harsin will be the Auburn head coach. Thanks for watching.